Hello everyone and welcome to today's Cambridge University Press ELT webinar. I'm very pleased to welcome as today's presenter, Joanna Kosta. Joanna is the co-author of levels 1, 2 and 3 of Prepare. She's taught English in both Europe and Asia and worked as a Director of Studies in London before taking up a career as an examiner and materials writer for Cambridge English Language Assessment. She's an experienced exams writer and has co-authored several other exam titles. So, over to you, Joanna.
Thanks very much, Alistair, and welcome to everybody. Thanks very much for taking the time to attend the talk today. I can see that you're all over the world, which is very exciting, imagining where you are. I'm actually in London, and as you can imagine, it's grey, miserable, drizzly, not very nice. Okay, so the subject of the talk today is the stress-free way to prepare students for CEFR schools. And I can see from the poll that we've done that roughly kind of half of you are preparing students for CE and the other half aren't. But I think that's not a problem. There should be lots of interesting information, even if you're not preparing students. I've got quite a lot of general information about A2. And of course, it might be that you are going to be preparing your students or you have prepared students for Cambridge exams. So hopefully there will be enough interesting information for you. Okay, so the aims of the talk today. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about stress and how it affects students. And we'll go on to kind of discuss how to keep everybody out of the panic zone. I think that is probably the most important thing when you're preparing students for an exam, how to keep everybody moving forward without kind of panicking and stressing too much. So we're going to look at how we can prepare our students thoroughly, but take things gradually, slowly, build up their knowledge so that we can avoid those horrible, stressful moments. We're going to look at exactly what A2 is, what A2 means, particularly in terms of vocabulary. And we're going to do that by looking at the English vocabulary profile. I will also talk about grammar a little bit, but I'll explain why later on why I'm not going to give that quite so much emphasis. So we're going to look at also how, when we write the Cambridge exams, how do we actually find out whether students understand the meaning of the language? So not just individual, pieces of grammar and pieces of vocabulary, but how do we find out whether they understand the meaning? And we'll have a look at the end a little bit about the actual exam day and how to sort of, allay students' fears, because for CEFR schools, they are quite young. So we will have a look at that. And at the end, hopefully, I will give you a list of ideas, about 10 ideas, which will hopefully cover everything that I've said above. There are a few activities in the talk, so feel free to answer in the chat box if you like, or you could use a piece of paper and just note down your answers. I will be kind of showing the answers. If there are any activities, I will show you the answers afterwards. Okay, so let's begin by talking about stress and how stress affects learning. I mean, I think all of us have been students at some point, had to do exams, and we know how stressful it can be. And I don't know about your countries in particular, but in Britain, we have quite a sort of an exam-oriented approach at the moment to learning. Our teenagers have lots and lots and lots of exams, and we do have quite a lot of problems with stress. So I think it's well worth thinking about. Now, this particular model comes from Seneca, a German educator, and I've put a link on the bottom so that if you're interested in the idea, you can read up a little bit more about it. So basically, he talks about these different zones that students find themselves in. The first zone is the comfort zone, and as it sounds, in this zone, everything is familiar, you feel very safe, you can probably reflect on what you know when you're in this zone. Not a great deal of stress here at all. You then move into the stretch zone, and this is the point where you grow So you may not be as comfortable as you were before, but it's still not a threatening place to be. And then after the stretch zone, you move into the panic zone, and that's where everything goes wrong, basically. So all of your energy, rather than your energy going into growing and expanding, all your energy kind of goes into managing your anxiety and trying to cope and feeling threatened and all the rest of it. Okay, so if you could just have a look at the questions we've got here. The first question is match these words with the right zone. So there are 9 adjectives. If you could match 3 adjectives to each zone, and then think about in which zone will most learning take place. So I will give you a couple of moments just to have a think and match the adjectives with the zone and think about in which zone will most learning take place. And I can see, yes, some people have already got the right idea. Yep. Yep, good. Okay, it looks as if most people have got the right idea. So if we just have a look here, hopefully this is what most of you came up with. So in the comfort zone, you feel secure, possibly bored, very relaxed, nothing much really going on. In the stretch zone, you're alert, excited, awake. In the panic zone, fearful, tense, and frustrated. Most of your students, most of the time, will be either in the comfort zone or the stretch zone. So they'll move between the two. They'll be comfortable and then stretched, and then the comfort zone will actually grow. So as they learn more, the comfort zone, can get bigger. And of course, somebody's just put a very good comment there. Yes, you're not necessarily bored in the comfort zone. No, not at all. But you can be. If you're there for too long, you can be bored. So I think it's very important to get students into the stretch zone regularly. Of course, they should also be able to go back to the comfort zone, practice what they know, reflect on what they know, be aware of what they've learned, and then they need to be stretched again. So we can say safely, keep them out of the panic zone. So it's easier said than done, because obviously as you push students, as you try to get them into the stretch zone, it can be quite easy to then let them slip into the panic zone. So if we think about how you praise students, now we're always told, or we have been historically told, that it is very, very important to give students, particularly young students, lots of praise. However, this does come with its own problems, and I don't know whether you have heard of the term praise junkies, but this is a problem in the States and in the UK as well, to an extent, that recently children and young people have been praised to such an extent that when they get into the workplace, they thrive, they need praise all the time, and it's actually quite difficult for managers to cope with. So I think there's a little bit of backlash against overpraising, and perhaps necessary to kind of hold back a little bit on the praise. Obviously some praise, but not too much. Be aware of how you deal with spoken mistakes. I think with spoken mistakes, it depends obviously on the context and what your aims are, but generally speaking, if somebody is trying to be fluent and trying to explain something to you, it can create stress and sort of anxiety if you constantly kind of jump in. So I think you probably need to be quite careful when you deal with spoken mistakes. Correcting written work, again, I think obviously there's more scope here. to correct written work. And what you might do is you might change the way you correct written work. So you might have a particular mistake that you're looking at for one piece of work, and you may ignore certain mistakes. And you may focus, say, on, if you've been looking at past tenses, you may focus on mistakes with past tenses. It can be anxiety inducing to kind of cover the whole piece of written work with lots and lots of red. On the other hand, I mean, my children have had teachers who kind of give a big tick and, oh, this is wonderful, fantastic, and don't correct anything. And I think that's a problem on the other side. So it's finding a balance. Giving results. Now, this one can create huge problems because children are naturally very competitive and they want to know, oh, what did you get and what did you get? And the person who didn't do very well is obviously going to be the stressed out one. So it's quite difficult, but it's probably best not to kind of broadcast to the class who's done the best and who's done the worst. If they want to share it between themselves, then I guess they should be able to do it. But sensitivity in sharing results. Dealing with mixed ability. Everybody has mixed ability in their classes, and it is quite difficult to handle, but it's important that the people at the bottom end of the class are able to feel encouraged and supported and, you know, praised when they do well, and likewise that those at the very top need to be pushed, and they need to feel that they are being stretched. And I can see somebody's just written, what works for one student doesn't work for another, and I agree completely. I think with the comfort zones as well, everybody will have their own comfort zone, and it is very, very important to take into consideration, you know, students' differing levels of stress and how they handle it. Okay, and finally, motivating and encouraging students, especially young students. If they're doing CEFR schools, they're probably sort of young teenagers, and obviously they need fun, they need things to be lively. You know, very sort of serious work all the time isn't likely to work really, and that will sort of exhaust them. So a little bit of fun. Okay, so stress-free exam preparation. Keep lessons challenging but enjoyable. Sounds easy, probably not so easy, but it is a question of trying to push them and trying not to make it too dry at the same time. And one way to do that is to expose students gradually to task types. So take your time. If you know you've got a year or you know you've got 18 months, there's no need to kind of hit them with everything straight away and kind of bamboozle them and make them think, oh, you know, I'll never understand this. Take it slowly, bit by bit, and build it up. Avoid talking about the exam all the time. I think, you know, the word exam, it's just very kind of stressful. And it is possible to prepare them, to give them the language that they need and tell them about all the task types without sort of scaring them and talking about it all the time. Yes, so concentrate on the language and the skills needed. And don't lose sight of the end goal, which is language proficiency. One thing which students can lose sight of, and parents possibly can lose sight of, is the fact that, you know, there is a reason why they're learning English, and it isn't just the piece of paper at the end. The end goal really is to be able to speak the language, because in their futures it's highly, highly likely these days that they will need English in their jobs or when they travel. And in a way, you know, they're quite lucky, because when my children did French, they didn't really have the feeling that they would ever need their language. Whereas students who are learning English, at least they can feel this actually is going to be useful. So I think that's very, very important, to keep sight of the fact that, you know, we're doing this for a very good reason and not just a certificate. Okay, now these quotes I took out of the Cambridge exam handbooks. And I just wanted to show them to you, to sort of point out that sometimes there's a big sort of people feel there's a big difference between exam English and general English, and actually it isn't. There really, with the Cambridge General English exams and general English, there is no big gap. So we can see from these quotes that Cambridge exams are meant to be an authentic test of real life English based on realistic tasks and situations, designed to encourage positive learning experiences. And so those should all be things that are happening in the classroom anyway, whether they're doing an exam or not. And hopefully by focusing on that, the sort of stressful side will be reduced a little bit. Okay, and another very important point is that Cambridge exams are aligned to the principles and approach of the CEFR. Now, I'm sure that you all know what the CEFR is, which is the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And basically, they cover all the learning of all different languages, and they're framed as can-do statements. So I have a few can-do statements for A2 to show you. So these are for A2. So if we have a look at the first one, can express simple opinions or requirements in a familiar context. Can have short conversations with friends about interesting topics. Can understand the general meaning of a simplified textbook or article, reading very slowly. And can make simple plans with people, such as what to do, where to go, and when to meet. So these are examples of A2 CEFR statements, and these are what the CET exam is meant to reflect, and does reflect, in fact. Now, the only thing about these CEFR statements is obviously they are very general. So they're can-dos. There's no actual language associated with them. So for that reason, the English profile was set up. Now, the English profile is a long-term collaborative research program, and its aim is to understand what the CEFR actually means for English. So the aim is to put some meat on the bones of those CEFR statements, those very, very general statements. So it's trying to investigate what learner English is really like. So it's looking at what does an A2 student actually know in terms of grammar and vocabulary. And this was done by looking at the learner corpus, the Cambridge Learner Corpus, and seeing what students of that level, what language they can actually produce. With that, they will then develop reference descriptions for each level. There are separate projects which focus on vocabulary, grammar, functions, spoken English, and pronunciation. In fact, the vocabulary and the grammar are already finished. They're done. And they are actually free resources. They're actually free resources. They're up on the internet now, and you can register for free for these two. The functions, the spoken English, and the pronunciation, those are still ongoing projects. And this is the web address. So if you follow that link, then you will be able to sign up for that, and it's incredibly useful. I'm going to show you now. Now, I think, Alistair, have we got, do we have a poll now on, yes, here we go. So the poll is, have you already signed up for English Vocabulary Profile? So I'm just interested to find out how many of you have already heard of it. Okay, so some people have. Okay, so the majority of you haven't come across the English Vocabulary Profile yet, but I'm very glad to see that some of you have. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the English Vocabulary Profile is like. So when you register for it, this is what you will find. Now, as you can see, it's British English and American English, so you can choose. You've then got the levels, all of the levels, A1 to C2, and you can either look at each level individually, so you can look at the whole of A1 or the whole of A2, or you can look at, A1 to A2, A1 to B1, etc. And how it works is, well, you can either browse A to Z, so you could look at the whole list of A1 words, for example. You could browse through the whole list. I think there's about 600 or 700 entries for A1, and obviously it increases as you go up. Or you can enter a word, you can look up a word. So here I have looked up the word free, and I've clicked A1 to C2, and here are the results. So you can see there's no results for free. So students at A1 don't yet know the word free. Cut 3 entries for A2, and then we've got 1 for B1, a few for B2, 1 for C1, and then some for C2. So 14 matches in total. Okay. What you can do then is you can click on the word free, show you on the next slide. So you can actually click onto the word and you will go a little bit deeper into the word. So when you get in, you'll see you've got the pronunciation of the word. You've then got the word family, so nouns, freedom, adjectives free, adverbs freely, and you then have the breakdown of the actual meanings of the word. So you can see at A2, I've narrowed this down to A2. So you can see we have 2 adjectives. We've got one which is not free. Are you free this evening? Haven't got much free time. And then we've got the no cost, meaning of free. And finally, we've got the adverb, to travel for free or to do something for free. So those are the three meanings, the three uses of the word free, which we have at A2. So if you're preparing candidates for the CET exam, then by using the EVP, you can see which words are likely to appear in the exam and which words are likely to be tested. Because we probably won't be testing, well, we won't be testing words which are sort of outside. Words which are outside A2 may well appear in the exam, but we are probably not going to test them. You can also see, if you look at the advanced search, you can also see here how you can, for example, here topic. If you open this, you will see topics such as clothes, nature, people and communication, food, things like that. So you could, for example, see all the A2 food words. You can also look up different parts of speech. So you can look up all the A2 adjectives, all the A2 verbs, all the A2 conjunctions, pronouns. And there is also a grammar section here. So that shows you things like countable and uncountable, or words which are usually used in the plural and things like that. So it's an incredibly useful resource, particularly if you prepare your own materials. So if you find a really nice reading text, for example, and you want to know how much of this vocabulary can I expect my students to know, and which words should I pre-teach? This is a very, very good way of checking, and to show you the level of things. Okay, so just a little task. So we saw, let's just go back a second. So for free, we saw there were 14 matches for the word free. Now I've chosen take, and I can tell you that for take in the EVP there were 101 entries. Yeah, 101 entries for take. So I've chosen 6 of them. And what I would just like you to do is just decide whether you think these are A1, A2 or B1. There's actually 2 for each. I'll give you a little hint. So you can just write it on a piece of paper, or you can put it in the chat box, you know, number 1, A1, number 2, A2, whatever you think. So let's just have a look and see whether you can figure out the level of those. Okay, that's excellent. Right, I can see most of you have absolutely got the right idea. So I'm going to put the answers up now. There. So just have a quick check and see whether you agree. I'm not sure whether any of those surprised you. I can see that most of you have been very, very accurate. So well done with that. You obviously have very good language instincts. Okay. All right. So, okay, moving on. I want to talk about paraphrase. I think in respect of preparing students for exams, obviously you need to know the level of, you need to know what language you need to teach them. And so you can use resources like the EVP, you can use the word list, which actually I do need to mention, and I have got a link for you, the A2 word list as well, which is actually very, very similar to the EVP. Obviously also the grammar, and for A2 there is, in the handbook, there's a very good grammar inventory, so which I meant to mention to you. So that's the first thing that you need to do. You need to understand what vocabulary do my students need to know, what grammar do my students need to know. And once you've figured that out, you then need to be able to understand how does the exam actually test that knowledge? How does the exam find out whether my students know that grammar and they know that vocabulary? One of the ways that we do it in the exams is with paraphrase. And so paraphrase is an incredibly important skill for students to know. Basically, what paraphrase means is saying the same thing in different words. So, synonyms and antonyms, big, large, opposites, obviously large and small, parallel grammar structures. So, for example, it's very big, it's not very small. Obviously, English has an absolutely massive vocabulary. I think English has the largest vocabulary of any language and quite a sort of flexible grammar. And that means that we are particularly able to say the same thing in lots and lots of different ways. And we do exploit that in our exams a lot. So it's used in many exam task types. So it's used in true-false. So you can imagine you have a text and you have some true-false questions, and the true-false questions will be paraphrases of what is in the text. So it will either be a correct paraphrase or it will be a slightly incorrect paraphrase. Then we have multiple choice questions, and it's very similar actually to true-false. So you have a question and then you have your options. One of the options will probably be a correct paraphrase of what's in the text, and the other 3 or 2 options will be wrong paraphrases. Then we have note completion, which you get in listening tests, and very often the note that's written on the question paper will be a paraphrase of what students hear. So they have to recognize the paraphrase and then they will be able to hear the correct word to write down. Then we have matching tasks, which again is similar to true-false in a way. You might have 3 texts and 5 items, and the students have to locate which text is the paraphrase in. And then information transfer. So for those of you who are teaching KET, you'll know that the part 8 is an information transfer where you have 2 small texts and some questions. And usually the question paper will have a paraphrase of something that's in one of the texts and the students have to find it. So it's used in a lot of task types. And it's a way of getting at the meaning, finding out whether students understand the meaning. And it's often used with distraction. So obviously distraction is put there to kind of catch the student out. And, you know, we may paraphrase the correct answer and we may have a word spot for the distraction. Or the distraction may be another paraphrase of something, a close paraphrase to something in the text. The thing about paraphrase as well is it's an incredibly useful life skill for students to have, because when they move on to university or to further study, they have to be able to paraphrase. Plagiarism, which basically, as I'm sure you know, means copying great chunks out of textbooks, is a big problem in universities, and universities have now got very, very good at catching students who plagiarize. There's very sophisticated software now. So if students can paraphrase well, they will be able to study well and they will be able to do well. And it's actually very, very good to start early, teach them how to do it early, particularly as a lot of students will go on to study in English as well. Okay, so here I have got a KET task for you to have a look at. So this is a KET Part 4 reading task, and I'm just going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes and just let you read the task and try the questions. And basically what you're going to be looking for is looking for the paraphrase. So you've got a question: who knows other people who live in homes similar to hers? And you've got 3 girls living in unusual homes. You need to find the paraphrase and find the answer. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that. Have a look, and then we will have a little discussion of what you find. Okay, brilliant. Right, I can see some of you have already got all the way to the end, which is very, very speedy. Okay, so I'm going to put up the next slide, which is basically the answers. So, as I'm sure you saw, Number one is A. Number one is Sarah, and this is the paraphrase. So who knows other people who live in homes similar to hers? And it's Sarah. She says, lots of my friends live on houseboats too, so it feels normal to me. So you can see basically the text and the item are paraphrases of each other. Number two, who says she feels safe in her home? So that goes here to Andrea, and she says the building is very strong and I never feel afraid. So that goes there. Who's happy with the size of her home? Number three, so that goes to Sarah, and she says we haven't got much space, but we don't mind. It's enough for us. So you can see, I won't go through all of them, but you can see that the item is a paraphrase of the text, and also there is distraction. So for example, where we talk about other people, friends, guests, visitors, that's the distraction, and that comes across in every text. So every text has some mention of friends or other visitors or guests. So the students are really having to read properly. They can't rely on a word spot. And in fact, if they look at a word spot, they are probably going to get the wrong answer, because it's very unlikely that they'll be able to get the right answer. It's almost impossible that they will get the right answer by word spotting like that. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Now this is a listening task. So this is Ket listening part 2. And the rubric says, listen to Jasmine telling her grandmother about her half-term holiday. What activity did each person do? For questions 1 to 5, write a letter A to H next to each person. You will hear the conversation twice. So under the people, we have 5 people. And on the listening script, the student hears the people mentioned in order. So when Jasmine talks, when Grandma talk, they'll talk about Jasmine, then Sophie, then Sam, then Joe. Those come in order. These are the answers, the activities, and they will not come in order. So they'll be mentioned all over the place. Sometimes they'll be mentioned as distractors, and sometimes they'll be the key. So just have a quick look at the text at the bottom between Grandma and Jasmine, and just have a look. The key to 0 is C, which is music practice. The key to 1 is actually G. I will tell you, it's not very difficult. So just have a look at the text and just notice the paraphrases. Yes, so Jasmine. So Jasmine says, I played the guitar a lot. I'm in the school concert next week and I need to get ready. So the key is music practice. And Sophie, did Sophie practice with you? So there's a bit of distraction. And the answer is she played hockey all week with her team. So the key is sport. And then she was lucky, no studying. So studying is the distractor, and it's a whacking great word spot. Okay, so I've got a couple of paraphrase games to show you. This one is pelmanism. Now, pelmanism is a memory game. So you basically have 2 sets of cards. You have green cards and you have blue cards. And you lay the cards out in front of the students and mix them all up. And they take it in turns to pick a pair of cards, a blue card and a green card. And what they're looking for is a match. So they are looking for a matching paraphrase. So for example, here we have, how much is it? So we've got, how much is it? And that matches to, what does it cost? Okay, so if the students turn up the blue, how much does it cost, with the green, what does it cost, then they have made a match and they keep it. So we've got, I don't agree with you, I think you're wrong. Go online for more information. All details are on our website. Don't forget your phone. Remember your mobile. So it's a really fun game and students love it, and it's very, very good. Because they're turning the cards over a lot, they're obviously seeing them a lot, and it's a great way to get it to get those paraphrases into their heads. And these ones I took from past papers. So I just looked through past papers. I looked at, the part one, and I found paraphrases between the items and the texts, and I wrote them down. Obviously, you can think of your own, and I'm sure you've got access to past papers or course books and things. So that's a very good game. And another one here is a paraphrase race. And this is another really fun activity which students really enjoy doing. And basically how you play this game is, as the teacher, you have a list of sentences. And again, these ones I've taken from CET exams. So, but again, you can think of your own ones if you don't want to. So the teacher has the list of sentences, and you then read the sentences one by one, and the students have to think of a paraphrase. They have to race to a paraphrase. Now, the only rule, well, the important rule here is that students have to make more than one change. So, for example, my bedroom is quite dark. If they say, my bedroom is quite black, then that wouldn't be a good paraphrase because it's only making one change. So they have to come up with something like, my bedroom is not very bright. And then that would, yes, that's a beautiful one. A chamber of mine is quite dimly lit. That's absolutely beautiful. If a student came up with that, yes, they would get a gold star. It's fantastic. And yes, you could give a sort of range of marks of how if they manage to paraphrase every single word. I mean, obviously at CET level, it's going to be quite difficult. But I've seen this game played with quotations by famous people. Like Einstein is very, very famous. Einstein has some amazing quotations, and Winston Churchill and Queen Elizabeth I. So quotations by famous people work very well as well. But that's a really, really fun game, a way to do paraphrase. Okay, right, moving on swiftly. Functional language. This is another way that we test meaning. We see whether students have understood meaning is we look at functional language. So in the writing paper on CET, it would be the communicative message, which is right at the very end. So that would be, ask someone to do something, invite them to come to your house, say what time, that kind of thing. On the listening and reading papers, the functions that we have are, for example, identifying preferences, giving simple opinions or understanding simple opinions, understanding people's intentions. And then in CET, the speaking paper, for CET, it's a bit limited actually in functional language. It's basically asking and responding to questions. So interestingly, most of the functional language that happens in CET happens in the writing paper and the listening and reading papers. Okay, just have a very brief look at this task. This isn't an exam task, but it's extremely useful for preparing students for exams. Just have a look through it and just see what functions will the students practice when they do this activity. Yep, suggesting, offering, good, yes. Yes, asking for permission, inviting. Yes, very good. I mean, you can see there's lots and lots and lots of functions that students would actually be negotiating, excellent, encouraging, yeah, agreeing and disagreeing, refusing, maybe, I'd prefer not to do the dishes, thank you very much, that kind of thing. So I've included this task really just to show you how even a task that doesn't look as if it has anything to do with exams, it can actually be excellent practice for exams, because this is exactly the kind of thing that will come up. Obviously, at the slightly higher levels, students in their speaking exams will be negotiating reaching agreement with their partner, making suggestions and all the rest of it. And in the CET exam, they'll have to recognise that. They probably won't have to do it, but they will have to be able to understand it when they hear it and when they read it. Okay. All right, and here's a few A2 function words. Now, these are the actual words which we have at A2 for functions. So these are the words which they could very well see on the question paper and which they need to understand. And they will need to be able to recognise the words which are used to actually perform those functions. So offering, inviting, ordering, saying what they prefer, maybe booking something, perhaps not for kept for schools because that's a little bit young for booking. Parents would probably be doing the booking. Okay. All right, moving swiftly on, we're a little bit short of time. So task types, very important to let students know what the task types are. Start early. Practice unfamiliar ones more than familiar ones. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, now these, I've got a few frequently asked questions. This is the kind of things that students will come up with as the exam gets closer and they start perhaps worrying a little bit about the exam. These are the kind of questions that they'll come up with. Answer sheets. What will happen in the speaking test? When will I get my results? What do I bring on the day? How long have I got? Do I have to spell everything perfectly? How strict are the word counts? So I think what's important for this kind of thing is to give students a chance to ask you these questions. All of the answers are on the Cambridge English website. And as long as you know the answer and you give the students the chance to ask you and give them the chance to kind of, say what's on their mind, then they'll be fine. Okay, and finally, tips and strategies for exam success. So I think as you get right up to exam day, it can be a good idea to get students to make a poster. And one way is to get them to think for themselves about strategies before the exam and during the exam. So you could give them something like this, which could be a Venn diagram or just a very big poster, and just get them to think about what do I need to do, what's really, really important for me to do before my exam and during my exam. And they can pool their ideas, can have a great big brainstorm, pool their ideas, and then make a lovely big poster and put it up on the classroom wall, and then you can kind of refer to it regularly. So here I've put a few ideas up for you. So I don't know whether you agree with any of those. You may be able to think of some more. I mean, students may well be able to think of more. Obviously, this is the absolutely perfect and ideal student, isn't it? Making a study plan, keeping up with homework. Yes, from my own experience with my teenagers, doesn't always work. But I think, it can be good fun to do it and to think about it. And it's probably surprising what they will come up with. Okay, and finally, my summary, my 10 ways to help you build exam confidence with your students. Number 1, start early, go gradually. Prepare students without pressure. So do push them, do encourage them. Don't let them be too relaxed, but try not to pressurize them too much. That does put a little bit of pressure on you, however, because it means that you need to know the exam and the level inside out. Use EVP and cambridgeenglish.org. Cambridgeenglish.org, there's so much information out there, it's almost baffling. Get students to paraphrase and reformulate as often and as much as you can. Think in terms of functions. Use practice tests wisely. So I would say use practice tests towards the end of the course and not too much, because I think they are a bit anxiety inducing. Tips and strategies. hold exam facts quizzes, so let students ask you about things that they're worried about and things that they don't know. And finally, an exam preparation poster. Okay, and finally, here are a couple of useful links. So this is the KET vocabulary list. That's the link to the KET vocabulary list, and this is the link to the handbook. So this will tell you what vocabulary will be in the exam, and this will tell you what grammar and functions will be there. I hope you've enjoyed the talk. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I think I will now be answering some questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Joanna. That's absolutely excellent. We've got one question already. This is from Anuta Koval, who asks whether the strategies that you've been suggesting are also valid for upper level Cambridge exams as well. Okay, Joanna, did you hear the question there?
I didn't hear anything. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you. Sorry. Okay,
Yes,
let's
no,
try
I
that
didn't
again.
hear. I didn't hear.
Okay, but I can assume you can hear me now. Great. So,
Yes, I can.
Anuta Koval asked if the strategies you were talking about there were valid for upper level Cambridge exams as well.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I mean, particularly the paraphrase. I mean, that goes all the way through. And obviously, the EVP takes you all the way up to C2. The functions actually are used more and more at the higher levels. So yes, very much, very relevant for all of the exams, definitely.
Okay, thanks. A question now from Yaroslava Lojdova, who asks, what are the best materials to prepare students for Cambridge English exams?
Okay, well, obviously there are lots and lots of course books, but there's a new one out which is called Prepare. So something which would be fantastic, of course. But I think a good course book, that the problem with some course books is, I think from my own experience, is the vocabulary isn't very well controlled. I would say the grammar tends to be quite comparable in all the course books that I've looked at. The problem often is with the vocabulary. I think some course books have all sorts of vocabulary in there, which really is sort of way above level. So I would have a good look at that and see whether you think that, the vocabulary that in the book that you've chosen is A2 level. And I think with Cambridge books, to be honest, that's something you can trust quite well, because we do have, the EVP and the corpus and those kind of things.
Okay, thanks. Question now from Isabel Gonzalez Bueno, who asks, Isabel mentioned that it's often parents who are the main source of stress for
Yes.
learners in exam classes. Do you have any suggestions about how to prevent parents from stressing their learners out?
Well, I think that is an excellent point. And I think, in years gone by, it was sort of between the teacher and the child, wasn't it? So if the child wasn't working and the child wasn't doing well, it was really the child was afraid of the teacher, and the teacher would tell the child off, and maybe the teacher would speak to the parent, and then the parent would support the teacher. And I think that nowadays, very often it's sort of the other way round, and it's the child isn't doing very well, and the parent comes and has a go at the teacher,
Mm.
which is actually very, very difficult. And I suppose you have to be very diplomatic. I think parents expect to be kept informed now very much. They like to know, exactly what the students are having to do, what the homework is. So I think I would say, very good communication between the teacher and the parent is crucial. And if any problems do arise, involve the parent as soon as possible. But I do agree that that is a modern issue, and I sympathise.
Okay, thanks. Now, do we have any more questions coming in for Joanna here? We'll look down and see what else. I've got a question from Sullivan Magalhaes, who asks what in your opinion, the top three KET prep books from Cambridge are. And if you have an opinion on that.
Well, I think there's obviously ours, which is, I would put up there. I mean, the advantage of Prepare, I think, is that it's especially for younger children, kept for schools. So I think that has a big advantage, and also it's very gradual. So we have 7 levels. 3 of those levels will take you up to Ket. So I think it takes its time, and I think that's very important. If you wanted a shorter course, then there's Compact, which is also for Ket for schools, but it's if you're using 2 course books, so if you're using a general English course book and then you want a short exam book, there's that one. Prepare sort of does everything. So Prepare isn't meant to be just for if you're doing Ket for schools. It's supposed to be, it can prepare you for general English as well. And I guess there's also Objective, which has been around for a long time and is another very good book.
Okay, thanks. A question now about what advice you would suggest for a young teacher who's only just starting to teach a Ket group. What particular advice would you have for such a teacher?
Well, I would say use the resources that are available. I would say look on Cambridge English, because that website is just amazing and it's improved so much. There's so much information there. There are so many resources, and this kind of thing where you can sort of get in touch with other teachers is very, very important. And I suppose just don't expect too much of yourself too early on. Just kind of build up your knowledge. It will take a while to build up the knowledge that you need. So, take it slowly, a little bit like I was talking about stress for the students. Don't put yourself in the panic zone. Don't expect sort of too much of yourself too quickly. But I would say cambridgeenglish.org website, and also the handbook. The handbook is wonderful. There's so much information in there. If you know and understand what's in the handbook and what's in EVP for A2 level, you can't go wrong, really, I think.
Okay, thanks. A question now from Fatima Vega, who says that some parents ask about the validity of Cambridge exams and the fact that the results expire.
Do they? I don't think they do they?
No, that's actually Andrew also has just come in saying that's not the case.
No, they don't expire, no.
Okay, excellent. So I'm glad we could put your mind
clear that one up,
at ease
yeah.
there, Fatima. Okay,
I
do we
think
have
you
any...
might be thinking of TOEFL, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I think those do expire, but...
Okay, do we have any more questions for Joanna here, or should we wrap that up there? Okay, I'll just leave another moment for possible questions here. Okay. And for people who'd like a shorter version of that link that Jenny just posted into the chat, just put a shorter version of that in there, which is easier to sort of copy and paste. Okay, I think then we'll... see, I can see multiple attendees are typing, so to see if there is another question there. Otherwise, I'd just like to say that... just say thank you very much, Joanna, for a really interesting session. Got lots of engagement. Had lots of engagement on Twitter as well. One of our most popular webinars on Twitter. Don't forget, everyone, that we'll be back next week when Mike McCarthy and Jan McCartan will be talking about blended learning, problems and prospects at the higher level. And you can sign up for that session by visiting our events page, cambridge.org/ELT events. The recording of today's webinar will be live on our blog and YouTube channel on Friday, and we'll send you a certificate by Monday. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thanks for your questions, and thank you particularly, Joanna, for another excellent session.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.